I'm Shaheen Tolles with the Duke Endowment in Charlotte, North Carolina.
I'm Dani Wolniak. I'm Kaylin LeBrun. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, from the Northside Achievement Zone.
Hi, welcome to Kansas City. I'm Jennifer Sykes.
Caitlin Moses Bowser.
Leslie Horno.
Jenny Day Burgett.
I'm Leanne Brivey.
Hi, I'm Catherine Thomas.
I'm Kim Tracy Prince.
I'm Jamie Perez from Center for American Progress in the nation's capital.
I'm Evan Roberts, he, him.
My name is Sam Crawford.
This is Crystal.
My name is Minna Jung.
Dan Meisler.
My name is Dan Mejia.
This is Gabriel Sanchez from Los Angeles.
I'm Mark Morgan from Level for Change in Chicago.
My name is Marisol Bayo.
And we're so excited to welcome ComNet 24 to our amazing city.
Home of the Kansas City Current.
I am so happy to be here, and I'm so happy that you're here too.
I can't wait to see you all in KC.
Let's go grab some barbecue.
Welcome.
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 Welcome. Welcome to ComNet 24.
Right here in Kansas City, Missouri.
Can't wait to connect with you, relax, strategize, and just celebrate all the beautiful work folks are doing.
See you at ComNet.
Let's connect.
I will see you at ComNet.
Welcome to Kansas City.
Welcome to ComNet 24. Let's do this.
Please welcome to the stage the Communications Network CEO, Sean Gibbons.
Hey, everybody. First, an apology. We are not fronting for the Dodgers. So the Mets fans may be feeling a little bit low at the moment. I think you still have another shot. You get another game against Shohei. And Gabriel, thank you for doing that. Welcome, everybody. How are you feeling? That was kind of weak. It seems like maybe people didn't have enough coffee. Can we try that one more time, please? How are you feeling? I'll accept that, but I kind of don't. Let me tell you why. I watched y'all last night. I think you had a good time. Is that a fair assessment? The line for the barbecue was long. I appreciate the patience. I think maybe next year we'll anticipate a bunch of our friends hopping off a plane, maybe more food, maybe more stations. But suffice to say, I hope you had a good time, and I hope you got out to the back lawn, which was amazing. Can I tell you what I saw last night? Yeah? Okay. So the first thing I did was I walked away from you all because I wanted to hear you. And what I heard was the most beautiful sound. You've heard this sound before. It sounds like when you're walking into a train station or maybe the airport on your way here, that lovely low roar. But I knew who I was listening to. It wasn't a bunch of strangers at Union Station in DC or folks at LAX. It was all of you. And who you are, as I've tried to say to you, as I've been in your inbox an awful lot, thanks for indulging me, is that this is a beautiful group of people. You are innovators, you are disruptors, and maybe most importantly, you're optimists. You roll out of bed every day and try to make the world a better place. What's unique about this particular gathering, it's not just you're dedicated to doing good, it's the how you do it. You believe that communications, storytelling, connecting with other people is the way that we will make social change. And as Jonah's about to tell you in a quick minute, that's right. That is the way to think about this. But before we bring him on, I want to bring you on. So if we could, everybody, maybe let's do it this way. Everybody with a yellow lanyard. Yes, we've marked you. It means that you're new here, and that's okay. You are welcome, you belong, and we're happy to see you. If you have a yellow lanyard, stand up. Quite a few of you this year, which is a very cool, great, lovely thing to see. But it's possible because it's your first time. You may not know. This is like Simon Says. I did not say sit down. Nice try. There'll be a lot of sitting. Jonah's going to talk to you for about 50 minutes. So you got a little time. You may not know quite how we do. So I think if we could, if this isn't already playing, the slide is going to be coming up here. This is the culture that we try to create. Is this playing? Do you see a little heart maybe? I can't see the confidence monitor. All right, it'll come up in a minute while I keep yakking at you. But for those of you who are new, you belong here, but you carry a responsibility, and it means you need to include everybody. So if you see somebody over the course of today who's maybe off on their own, and maybe that doesn't mean like in their phone talking to their boss. Here's the video. Bring them in. Introduce yourself. As several of you have heard me say, and maybe this can be one of our themes of the week, is no one bites. So you came here because you wanted something. You wanted an answer to a question. You wanted to learn something new. You wanted to connect with some people outside of the four walls where you work. And I'm telling you, it's on offer. But I am not going to be walking around, as I have been over the last couple of hours and last couple of days, grabbing you and pulling you into conversations. Please take advantage. Take the initiative. And I brought a few helpers. Now, for those of you wearing a red lanyard, you're a ComVet. Eric Brown, you've been here for 21 times, if I'm not mistaken. 21 back there in the corner, and he's a Mets fan, so be nice to him today. Stand up, Red. Or ComVets, or whatever you all want to call yourselves. All right, now stop looking at me and start looking at your neighbors and say this very simple thing. Hello, how are you? My name is. All right. You guys could do this all day. This is that beautiful sound I was talking about. Shooty, maybe we take the house lights down, encourage these lovely people to sit down. Okay, so here's table stakes. This is how we do here at the network. We talk to each other. We help each other out, not just here. So I'm going to scold you about this. We'll be doing this again, or we'll be doing this in March online. We want you guys to connect with one another. But we got to get about our business. Jen's going to be up here in one quick minute. I am going to take the privilege of one last little indulgence, which is, for those of you who've been here before, you know this, but for the newbies, this is an invitation and an offer. We have an American hero with us, right down there. If I hadn't broken my knee recently, I'd jump down and give him a hug. But Dr. Clarence B. Jones, those of you who know, you know, 93 years young, helped to write the Dream Speech, wrote much of the Dream Speech, I should really say, with Martin Luther King for the March on Washington in 1963. And he is the man who smuggled the letter from the Birmingham jail out of the Birmingham jail over the course of several days. And he is with us here. And we stand, all of us, every single one of us who do this work, who roll out of bed and try to make the world better using comms for good, we stand on that man's shoulders. So give him some love. All right, you just made a 93-year-old man get up. With that, let's let him have a seat. I'm going to join you, sir, in just a quick minute. Jonah's coming. Gang, we're off to a great start. We're going to have an amazing couple days together. Please, please, do what you just did. Be in this. We're in it together. Thank you.
So I want to start today with just a small observation, which is that all of us here actually have something in common. Regardless of where you came from, regardless of what organization you represent, regardless of what role you have in that organization, we all have something that we care deeply about. It might be an issue. It might be a community. It might be a cause. And we are all doing amazing work to help get the word out about that thing, to help that organization, to help that community, to help that cause, to help that issue. But unfortunately, doing great work isn't enough. We have to increase the impact of the great work we're doing. And so today, I'm going to talk about a way that we can do that. A way that we can all increase the impact of the great work that our organizations and causes and communities are doing. And I'll talk about a few things today. I'll talk about increasing our influence, communicating more effectively, and becoming better leaders and colleagues, right? All things that we care about. And in particular, I'm going to talk about a way that we can do those things. Everything we do, almost everything we do, involves language. I am speaking to you right now using language. If you are reading words on the screen, they are written in language. Language is how we send emails and put together PowerPoint decks and make social media posts and speeches and communicate through language. But it turns out that while we think a lot about the ideas we want to communicate, the points we want to get across, the general thoughts we want to say and get out there, we think a lot less about the specific words we use to communicate those ideas. And unfortunately, that's a mistake, because subtle shifts in the language we use can have a huge impact. For example, adding the right word to a request, just one word to a request, can make people about 50% more likely to say yes. Saying you recommend rather than you like something makes people about a third more likely to take your suggestion. And in everything from the language we use in email to the language someone might use in applying for a loan provides subtle insight into who they are and how likely they are to behave certain ways in the future. And so the only question then left is, what are these magic words and how can we take advantage of their power? And so, as was nicely mentioned, I'm Professor Jonah Berger. I'm a marketing professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. And what I'm going to do this morning in about the 30 to 45 minutes we have together is give you a brief tour of my recent New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller, Magic Words. Right? I've spent the last decade studying the science of language. And you might say, well, hold on. Right? What's new? We've been using language for thousands of years at this point. What's new about the way we use language? Well, here's what's new. It used to be, right, that people just made observations about language. I think that certain words are more impactful, right? I love reading on Forbes. Here are the 5 things you should never say in an interview. Here are the 4 words that you should use for certain things. And opinions are great. I love opinions. Unfortunately, people tend to like their own opinions more than other people's opinions, but we all love our own opinions. But you know what's better than opinions? Data. Because in the last 10 years, there have been 2 revolutions that have changed our study of language forever. The first is access to data. Almost everything we do now, many of the things we do now, are digitized. Billions of people every day share their thoughts and opinions online. You get on a Zoom call, at the end you can spit out a transcript when everything that was said, right? There are repositories of emails and newspaper articles and movie scripts and song lyrics, and language is captured in many more ways than ever before. That's revolution 1. But the second is new tools that allow us to parse that language for insight. Right? Just like the telescope revolutionized astronomy or the microscope revolutionized biology, there are new automated natural language processing tools that allow us to study all this data and extract insights. We've looked at thousands of customer service calls to understand what words lead to greater customer satisfaction. We've looked at tens of thousands of pieces of written content to look at what holds attention. We all write long emails and pieces of content and white papers that we send out to people, and we hope that they read it. Do they? How can we be better at holding their attention? How can we write in ways that will hold their attention? We've looked at the language of sales pitches and social media posts and language across a variety of different domains, all to understand the underlying science. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. It's not random, it's not luck, it's not chance. There's a science behind why certain language is more effective than others. And if we understand that language, if we understand the science of those magic words, we can increase our impact. And in fact, looking across all these different domains, I found there are 6 key types of language that come up again and again. Whether we're trying to persuade someone to take action or hold an audience's attention. Whether we're trying to get more engagement on our social content or get donors to pay attention to the issues we're doing, right? Lots of things around talking about storytelling. Storytelling's great. What makes a more effective story? We've looked at tens of thousands of movies and TV shows and books to understand ways of writing that make those narratives more impactful. And again, these same factors come up. I put them in a framework called the SPEAK framework. The S is for the language of similarity. The P is for the language of posing questions. E is for the language of emotion. A is for the language of agency. The first C is for the language of confidence. And the second C is the language of concreteness. And you might say, well, wait a second, that doesn't spell speak. You're paying attention. Thank you. Good. I'm glad. Right? There should be a K at the end. You're exactly right. I was not clever enough to come up with an acronym that ended with a K, but as someone pointed out, K is one of the difficult letters in Scrabble to actually use, and so I feel a little bit better about that. Hopefully the two C's will make it more memorable. But my goal here today is really simple. I want you to walk out of here with at least 2 or 3 things you can do tomorrow to increase the impact of your communications. Whether we're talking about the communications to the population at large, the community at large, or your communications at the office to your colleague or boss or peers. How can we increase our impact by understanding how language works? That's what we're going to talk about today. And so I won't have time to dive into all 6 of these principles. I'll talk about at least a couple of them. I'll talk about what they are, the science behind them, how they work, and then I'll give you a couple of ways to apply them. And hopefully there'll be time for at least a couple questions at the end, but if not, feel free to come up to me afterwards. I'm happy to answer questions. Oh, and by the way, just to point up here, in case it's useful, if you don't have time for questions, you want to reach out on social media, I'm at J1Berger on either Twitter or LinkedIn. And there's also a whole bunch of free resources, both a one-pager with the framework as well as some application guides to apply these ideas just on the resource tab of my website. So feel free to check that out as well. And hopefully today will be an introduction to some of the recent science of language that I and a whole bunch of colleagues have been working on, but I'd be happy to chat further in any way that is interest to you. Okay, so let's start with a challenge that all of us often have, which is persuading others. Right? All of us would like to be a little bit more persuasive. And so a number of years ago, some scientists went to a local preschool. Then they asked kids to do something that kids love to do, which is clean up. You're laughing because you have kids and you know how difficult it is to get them to clean up. Good. Yeah, so kids don't want to clean up, right? And there was a mess. There was a bunch of blocks everywhere and crayons and things spilled. And the teacher said, hey, it's time to clean up. But they tried a couple of ways of asking people to clean up. The first was very simple. They asked for help. They said, hey, can you help clean up? As we often do as parents and colleagues, asking others for help. But they were interested in whether language could shape the impact of their request. And so for some students, they asked them for help. And for other students, they asked them to be a helper. Can you be a helper and clean up the classroom? Now, the difference between help and helper is infinitesimally small. If you don't believe me, look up on the screen. You can tell it's 2 letters. Yet those 2 letters had a huge impact. Adding those 2 letters, asking to be a helper rather than asking for help, led to a 30% increase in kids being willing to help. Now, that's fun, that's great, but you could say that's kids in a classroom cleaning up. What does that really matter? Let's take something that matters a little bit more, particularly in the next few weeks, and that is voting. How can we get people to turn out to vote? How can we get them to cast a ballot? Everyone knows they should, but not everybody does it. So they sent out appeals to some people to ask them, hey, please go vote. And for other people, they asked them to be a voter. Now again, the difference between vote and voter is even smaller. Here it's 1 letter rather than 2. And here we're talking about adults rather than kids. Yet that 1 letter led to about a 12 to 13% increase in people's likelihood of turning out to vote. And that's really interesting and very powerful, but probably at this point you're wondering, why? Why is helper more effective than help or voter more effective than vote? And it comes down to the difference between actions and identities. Right? We all know that we should take certain actions. We all know that we should vote and help and exercise and eat healthier and do all the things we know that we're supposed to do. But we're busy. And the sausage and the bacon and all those other things at breakfast look pretty good, right? And so we know we should exercise, but we're on the road. We know we should vote, but we're busy. What we care more, though, about certain actions are holding desired identities. We want to see ourselves as smart and knowledgeable and efficacious and funny, and so we do actions in service of holding those identities. We want to see ourselves as in shape, we better go exercise once in a while. We want to see ourselves as healthy, we better eat healthier. And so we take actions to hold desired identities. And what that means then is by turning actions into identities, by asking people to be a helper rather than help, we can make them more likely to take those actions because they care about the identities more than the actions. right? People are busy, but hey, if helping becomes an opportunity to see myself as a helper, if voting becomes an opportunity to see myself as a voter, well, now I'm much more likely to do it, right? I'm much more likely to take that action because now it's an opportunity to claim a desired identity. Do you want to donate or do you want to be a donator? Do you want to support a cause or do you want to be a supporter? Taking those actions is great, but holding those identities is even better. Same is true for negative behaviors, but in the opposite direction. Losing's bad. Being a loser, being branded a loser, would be even worse. Right? There was a piece recently on social media talking about a famous celebrity, not just saying they farted, but they called the celebrity a farter. I was sitting there going, wow, I would not want to be called a farter, right? What does that suggest? It suggests it's not just something you did, it's something about who you are, right? People really want to avoid negative things if taking an action would make them a loser, right? And research finds, hey, cheating is bad, but if cheating on a test would make you a cheater, well, now you're much less likely to do it, right? And so by framing negative actions as negative identities will make people less likely to do those things. Don't tell people, tell them don't litter, tell them don't be a litter bug. Now I'm less likely to do it because I don't want to claim that negative identity. And the same is true for describing people, even for motivating yourself. Imagine I told you I have two friends, one who runs and one who is a runner. Which one of those people runs more? I bet you'd say the runner, because now it sounds like a stable part of who they are, right? Want to describe someone else in a positive way? Don't just say they lead, say they are a leader. Social media companies have done a great job, right? Calling people who create stuff, they're not just create stuff, they are creators. Now it is a job, right? Sounds like a stable part of who we are. Even for motivating ourselves. If we describe ourselves as a runner, well, now we feel like we got to go out and run once in a while. And so by turning those actions into identities, we're much more likely to take the actions to claim those identities. Now, this is just one example, though, one example, science-backed example, a much broader principle, and that is the language of agency and identity. Words aren't just words. They don't just convey information. They say what it means to engage in a particular action, what it says about a person, and what it means. Let me give you another example here. All of us would probably like to be better problem solvers, right? More creative when push comes to shove. But scientists are wondering, hey, right, could a subtle shift in language increase our creative impact? And so they gave people a bunch of problems and asked them to solve those problems. They were difficult problems to solve. And some people took the traditional approach. When solving a tough problem, we often say, what should I do? But for half the people, the scientists didn't encourage them to think about what they should do. They asked them to think about a subtly different approach. What could you do? Now again, the difference between could and should is very small. It's only a few letters. But that subtle difference led to a big impact in the creativity of the solutions people came up with. Why? Because shoulds make us feel like there's one answer. There's one right answer. I just have to figure out that thing that I should do. Whereas coulds encourage us to widen our blinders a little bit. Take a look around and see all the possibilities. Now, you've been in brainstorming sessions. Not all the possibilities people come up with are actually good ideas, right? But by at least considering those possibilities, we're much more likely to come up with creative solutions because we think more broadly. And so the implication here, very simply, is turn shoulds into coulds. Whether trying to come up with more creative solutions yourself or motivate a team to do the same thing, don't encourage them to think about what they should do. Think about possibilities by encouraging them to think about what they could do. Let me give you one more example here. So this comes from a little bit of the work we've done on grabbing attention. And obviously, grabbing attention is challenging, right? Any of you who work in social know, hey, lots of people are sort of scrolling through social media. Very few people are actually engaging with the content, right? How do we get people to pay attention to what we're putting out there and hold that attention? And so I did a project a few years ago with a big company who posts lots of content on social media. And they were interested in what makes their content more impactful, what increases engagement. So we analyzed thousands of posts, looking at the language of those posts. And controlling for what they were talking about and the type of things they were trying to get people to do, we found a very small class of words had a surprisingly big impact. And that was words like you. You, you'll, your. Posts that had those words in them were much more likely to get engagement. And so one question is why? Why are these second-person pronouns, words like you, so impactful? And it turns out, if you think about it, you acts like a stop sign, right? When we say something, when we use the word you, it suggests to people, hey, this is not just for everybody, it's for you. You in particular, right? Rather than saying, hey, here are 5 tips to save money, here are 5 tips to save you money, right? Information that's important, here are 5 pieces of information that you will find important. Using the word you acts like a stop sign and draws people attention. And I want to be clear, I don't mean saying you one time is going to make everybody pay attention. Definitely not. But it increases the likelihood that more people pay attention, makes that broadcast medium feel a little more like a narrowcast medium, and makes that content feel more relevant to the individual. And so using you can be a great way to grab attention. But building on this work, right, we analyze a different type of content. We also analyze customer support pages. And I know that this is a little bit less relevant for some of you, but you may have sections of your website or different places where you give people information. And the broader concept, I think, will be quite relevant. So we analyze these pages. If you had an issue with your phone or connecting with your laptop or using your digital watch and there was a problem with it, you could go to this company's site and get information. So I analyze all their help content. What made that content more helpful? And if you was just good, period, you should have made those pages helpful. But that's not what we found. In fact, we found just the opposite. The more those pages use the word you, the less helpful people found those pages. And so one question is why? Why did you increase the impact of social media content or hold attention, but hurt on these customer support pages? And when we thought about it, we realized something very important. You has multiple functions, right? Language has multiple functions. Just like a tool, it can do different types of things. You is great for holding attention, but you also suggests fault or blame. If you go to a website and the website says, hey, if your phone is broken, you need to reboot it, and then you need to do these 6 or 7 steps, people sit there going, why do I have to do all the work? This is your phone. Why are you blaming me? Your phone broke, right? And so we need to be really careful about what I'll call accusatory use. And this is really easy to see in our personal life, right? You come home and you say to us, your spouse or partner or friend, whatever it might be, you say, hey, did you walk the dog? Did you make dinner? Right? And somebody feels, why is it my job to make dinner? Right? Why didn't you make dinner? What you really probably mean is, did the dog get walked? Is there food or do I need to make it? But you makes it seem accusatory. Same in an organizational context. Did you get that report done? Are you finished with this? It can seem accusatory even when we don't need it to. And so yes, you can grab attention, but it can also suggest fault or blame. Think about the context we're in. If it's a context like social media or an email subject line or other places, it can be a really effective way to draw people in when we need to grab attention. But if we already have their attention, let's be careful about using it in ways that suggest fault or blame. And I give you one more example here in the sort of realm of pronouns, right? We did some research looking at words like I and we and things along those lines. And think about if we did some research. Do we want to talk about I found this? If you guys could put up the screen, thank you. I found this or results show this, right? How many of you think if I just did some research and I want to share that research, I should say I found X? This is a choice. You're going to pick one of the two things. I found X, results show X. Nobody voted. We'll try one more time. I found X, results show X. Okay, everybody thinks results show X. Good. Well, you're right and you're wrong. Because it depends on your goal, right? And maybe this is where your intuition is. Which of these suggests that it's more subjective? I, right? If I say I found this, it doesn't suggest it's true. It just suggests I found it. Maybe somebody else could have found something different. If I say results show this, what's very objective, right? I didn't have anything to do with it. This is what the results are. And so yes, I can be subjective, so maybe we won't go with results show, except if we want to get credit for it, right? Because when we say it results show, it also suggests, well, I didn't have anything to do with this. And so we may, depending on the part that we're talking about, want to use those languages of I or not, right? If you want to get credit for the work, I did all these things and the results show this, right? Getting credit for the work you did, but not getting credit for the finding. The finding is just out there. It is what it is. And so think about when we use words like I as well as you in different sorts of situations. Okay, I want next to go to the language of posing questions, and I spent a little bit of time on that language of agency identity. I want to go to a slightly different bucket here, and I find questions fascinating. I've done a bit of research on questions. I've talked about it in a prior book, The Catalyst. I find they're a powerful tool to increase our impact in a variety of ways, and I'll talk about a few ways here. And so one of the key insights here is that people want to feel like they are in control. They want to feel like they are in the driver's seat. Why did I support a cause? Why did I donate money? Why did I take an action? Why did I buy a product, use a service, support an initiative at work? I did it because I thought it was a good idea. But as soon as we come around, whether we are a colleague or peer, whether we are a communications person, whoever we are, or parent even, right? As soon as we come along and we push people a little bit, now they're no longer clear who's in the driver's seat. Am I in the driver's seat or are you in the driver's seat? The more I feel like you were in the driver's seat, the less interested I am in doing what you suggested, because essentially people have an ingrained anti-persuasion radar. It's almost like a missile defense system that looks in the environment for incoming projectiles, right? Think about when a telemarketer calls you on your phone. You don't sit there going, wow, I can't wait to pick up and hear what this person has to say, right? When you get a political text asking for money, right, you delete it and report it as junk. When you get that email or that request on LinkedIn from someone you don't know, right, you engage in defensive measures to avoid or ignore it. Or even worse, you actually do exactly what you guys are doing right now. When we hear someone speak, when we read a piece of communication that comes from an organization, we don't just sit there going, yes. We sit there going, yes, but. Yeah, Professor Berger, this seems sort of neat, but does it really apply to my job? Right? I mean, I get how maybe this would work for a business, but what about a nonprofit? Is it really going to be effective in that situation? Or I see how this might work, but not this other piece. Right? We poke and prod arguments till they come crumbling down. And so one question then as communicators, how do we avoid this anti-persuasion radar? How do we get people to buy into something and get them to change and get them to move forward in a particular direction? And at the core, what we need to do is allow for agency. We need to give them back some of that sense of freedom and control and put them back in the driver's seat. Questions are a great way to do that. Let me give you a couple examples of strategies here. The first is painfully simple. It's called providing a menu. And what do I mean by that? Well, often when we want people to do something, we say, hey, I think you should do X. You should donate. You should support us. You should turn out. You should take this particular action. You should care about this issue. Why? Here are a whole bunch of reasons. And the listener, the reader, is sitting there going, yes, but. Of course, your organization would say the environment's important. You're an environmental organization, right? No organization says, oh, yes, our cause is not important. No, there was a survey of all the important causes, and ours was like, in the 57th percentile of a list. Everybody says, no, our cause is really important. Our issue is really important. But the people getting that email or communication don't know whether to believe you or not. They're pushing back. And so what do good communicators do? Well, they don't just give people one option. They don't just say, do X, think X. They say, hey, we think you should do X or Y. Which one do you think is a better idea? And notice what that does. It subtly but importantly shifts the role of the listener. Because now rather than sitting there and thinking about all the reasons they don't want you to suggest it, instead you've given them a new job. Which one of them they like better? And because they're focused on which one they like better, they're much more likely to take one of those actions at the end of the interaction. And it's called providing a menu because this is exactly what happens when you go out to dinner. Right? They don't say, hey, here's dinner. And they don't say, hey, we'll make whatever you want. They say, here's a limited set of options called a menu. Choose from within that choice set. It's guided choice. It's encouraging people, but not forcing people. Giving them that sense of agency and control to make them feel like they have some options while shaping the direction in which they're going. Now, if you're giving people options, how many options should you give them? I heard some tentative threes. Anybody else? There's no one magic number. If you said 2, you said 3, both are right. Just not 57. That's too many, right? A limited set of options that's manageable. Let me ask you one more question. Some of the more clever folks in the audience are like, I've got this. I'm going to give people 2 options. The thing I want them to do and something I know that they would never do, that they would hate, a decoy. And then they'll feel like they have to pick the one I suggested. Is that going to work? No. Not only because they're going to feel like you tricked them, but because you didn't give them a choice. When you give people 2 options that they'd actually consider, right, rather than sitting there and saying this is a yes-no choice, it becomes an either-or choice, and they focus on those 2 options and which one they like better, and ignore all the other things they could do instead. Right? If you give people real choices that they'd consider, they focus on the difference between them rather than option D, E, F, H, Y, Z, all the other ones that they could do instead. You go on Amazon, right? They have enough choices there. You don't think about all the other choices that are available on other sites. There's enough choice that people feel like they have some control, so they don't search elsewhere. And so giving people choice can be a great way to encourage action. Let me build on that with another strategy that involves questions, and this one's called Ask, Don't Tell. And the insight here is questions rather than statements. When we make statements, people push back. When we ask questions, something different happens. And so I was talking to a leader of an organization recently, and she was having trouble motivating her team. She needed them to stay late and put in extra hours, and they didn't want to do it. They were tired and burnt out. So she needed a different strategy. She calls a meeting, and she starts by asking a rhetorical question. What kind of organization do we want to be? A good organization or a great one? What do you think people said? Great organization. right? And then she asked a real question. She said, well, how do we get there? How do we become a great organization? Because good questions do three things. First, they deactivate that anti-persuasion radar. Rather than telling people what to do, you're asking them for their opinion, and there are few things people enjoy more than sharing their opinion, right? But second, good questions allow you to collect information. As leaders, as communicators, lead you to figure out better ways to achieve your goals or alternate paths to get there, right? Questions allow us to have a better sense of our audience. But the third thing is really interesting. Good questions encourage commitment to the conclusion. And what do I mean by that? Well, if the boss says, hey, what do we do to become a great organization? And someone says, hey, I think we should do X, Y, Z, it's a lot harder for them not to want to go along because it was their idea in the first place, right? People love being involved in a process. People love feeling ownership over an outcome. I was talking to someone recently, said, God, their boss, they said, my boss loves feeling like everything is his idea. I said, that's really interesting, but it's not only your boss. Everybody likes feeling like something is their idea, because the more they feel like it's theirs, the more they've participated in the process or have claim to the outcome, the more they want to see it succeed. And so good questions allow us to involve others, allow them to participate, give them ownership, and make them want to see our thing succeed. Let me give you one more example here, one more strategy around the power of questions, and then I'll give you one more that's a different one. This one's called highlighting a gap. And to show you this one, I'm going to show you an anti-smoking ad from Thailand. And I want you to watch the video, see what you think. There'll be subtitles at the bottom. And afterwards, we'll talk about why it works. Okay? So here we go. Pretty powerful stuff, right? Yeah. So this went by very quickly, so let me give you a brief overview. First, campaign was hugely successful. 40% increase in calls to the quit line. Videos of the campaign go viral around the web. But what is more interesting, at least to me, is why did this work? What made this so effective? The Thai Health Promotion Foundation, the organization behind this, realized they had a problem, which is that if we just keep telling people what to do, they will ignore us. They will delete our emails, they will stop watching our ads, they will ignore the possibility of changing. And giving them information is not enough, right? Many of us think, oh, if we just hit people over the head with information, they will come around. Here's the problem. Many people have the information, and they're just not that interested, right? Take the smokers. They know all about the dangers of smoking. Lung cancer, emphysema, strokes. They're like doctors with their encyclopedic knowledge of the dangers of smoking, and yet they are still doing it. Information is not going to get them to change, so what will? Well, the Health Promotion Foundation realized something really important. People like their attitudes and their actions to line up. If I say I care about the environment, I better recycle. If I say I care about a certain sports team, I better watch their games. If I want my attitudes and my actions to line up, and if they don't line up, a negative emotional reaction called cognitive dissonance occurs, and we do work to resolve that dissonance. We've got to change our attitudes or our actions, which is exactly what the Health Promotion Foundation did. They highlighted a gap. They said, hey, smoker, you just told this kid not to smoke, but you're smoking. Want to do something about it. And the smokers are stuck. They're sitting there going, well, what do I do? And they've got two choices. They can tell the kid to smoke, which they're not going to do, or they can think about quitting smoking themselves, which is what 40% of them did, right? This campaign highlighted a gap between attitudes and actions and encouraged the listener to do the work to resolve that gap, right? Rather than telling someone, hey, here's why you should care about our cause, why don't you start with a question? Do you care about the environment? Do you care about the future of this community? Do you think education is important? Pick a question that most people are probably going to say yes to, at least the people that would support your cause in the first place. And if they've taken that step to say yes to that question, well, now they're going to be much more likely to want to be consistent with what they just said, right? You've encouraged them to commit to the conclusion. And so in a variety of situations, highlighting a gap can encourage people to take that desired action. Let's be careful, though. Is this telling people they're a hypocrite? Is this telling people they're wrong? No. Because last time I checked, right, at least with my spouse, she doesn't like being told that she's wrong. Right? If I come home and I say, hey, honey, you know, what you said and what you did aren't aligned, she doesn't sit there going, oh, thank you very much. Right? She says, screw you. I'm not interested in you. Right? And so we have to encourage people to get there themselves. Not because we told them, but because we encourage them to go down a path where they got there themselves. One more thing from questions. One last thing here, and that is, look, often we're stuck in a tough problem. We don't know what to do. We're struggling. We think we could ask someone for advice, but think we shouldn't. Why? We're worried they're busy, they might not know the answer, or worse, they'll even think less of us if we ask them for advice. And so some researchers looked at, is that correct? Is asking people for advice a bad idea? They had people engage in a variety of social interactions. Some people asked for advice, some didn't. They found something really interesting. It wasn't that asking for advice was negative. In fact, just the opposite. Asking for advice made people seem more confident, not less. Why? Not only does it make them seem curious, which is good, but asking questions makes people think positively of you in a particular way, right? Everyone's egocentric. All of us think we give pretty good advice. And so when someone comes around and goes, hey, what do you think about this? We sit there going, wow, you have great taste. Because out of all the people you could have asked, you asked me, so clearly you have very good taste, right? So ask for advice. Not only, right, will that allow you to collect information, but it'll also lead you to be perceived more positively as a result. So if you see someone at this conference and you think that they would have good advice, you might as well ask them, right? You'll get some good information as a result. Let me spend my last sort of 5-7 minutes here, and then I'll save time for questions, talking about a particular type of language. And to do that, I want to talk about somebody that no one is probably familiar with, but this gentleman, Donald Trump. And I want to be careful. I don't want to get into politics today. You are allowed to vote however you want to vote. You're allowed to believe whatever you want to believe. But I want to point out something, which is whether you like him or not, and feel free to do either one, right? You can't deny that Trump has done an amazing job selling his ideas. If you disagree with those ideas, you're probably horrified and you wonder why people believe them. And if you like those ideas, you're probably very happy about it. But let's dig beneath under the surface to say, well, why is it working? Regardless of whether you like him or not, why is what he's doing working? Here's a speech that he made a number of years ago when he was first running for office. He said, I will build a great wall, and nobody builds walls better than me. Believe me, and I'll build them quite inexpensively. Our country's in serious trouble. We don't have victories anymore. We used to have victories, but now we don't have them. When was the last time anybody saw us beating, let's say, China in a trade deal? I beat China all the time, all the time. Now, this speech was kind of panned in the media. Right? People thought it was vacuous and empty and a number of different things. Yet less than a year later, he was elected president. And so again, whether you like him or not, I want to set aside for a moment and say, what about what he's doing is working? Right? And it turns out that what he's doing is actually not unique to him. It's the same thing that a lot of startup founders and entrepreneurs do. It's the same thing that gurus, so-called gurus, often do, or leaders of organization. Trump speaks with a great deal of confidence. And so I want to spend a couple minutes understanding what the language of confidence is and then when we should use it. And so what do I mean by the language of confidence? Well, he uses a lot of words like definitely, clearly, obviously, unambiguous, undeniable, guaranteed, precisely, essential. What linguists might call definites or absolutes. There's no black and white. There's no gray, I'm sorry. It's all black and white, right? This is definitely a great idea. This will certainly work. This is essential for everything. He speaks with a great deal of certainty. Right? Coming back to this speech here, he's not just building a wall, he's building a great wall. Right? No one builds them better than him. We don't have any victories anymore. Not just we have some victories, 0 victories. Right? Speaking in definites or absolutes. Contrast that with the way that most of us speak most of the time. Right? Most of us speak quite differently. We say, well, this might work, or I think this could work, or this might be a good idea. Right? Speaking with certainty has a great deal of positive impact. Some research on financial advisors, for example, showed that the more certain financial advisors' language was, the more likely other people were to choose them and support them. Why? Because when someone speaks with a great deal of certainty, it's a lot harder not to believe they're right, because they seem so convinced of it themselves. And so certainty increases persuasion. And that might seem obvious, but that's not how many of us speak often, right? Most of us communicate, particularly in our personal communications to colleagues, for example. This might work. This seems like a good course of action. I think this is a strategy worth pursuing. We use what are called hedges. Now, I want to be careful here, right? And I'll get there in a couple minutes, but I'm not saying that you should never hedge, and I might say differently, but I'm going to get there. We think, right, that whatever we say is fine, that whatever turn of phrase is fine, but when we're hedging, we are undermining our own impact. And so we got to think about what to do about it. And so let me say a few things. First, I'll come out strong. Since hedging is bad, ditch the hedges. Don't hedge, right? Particularly if you want to persuade someone, don't hedge. Don't undermine your own impact by using words like might or could or maybe or I think. Second, though, if we need to hedge, and this is where I'm hedging, right? Call out the uncertainty. Because there are times that we need to hedge. I'm not saying never hedge, right? I'm saying don't hedge just because it's convenient. Don't hedge just because it's easy. Don't hedge just because you haven't thought about what you want to say, right? Because you're undermining your own impact. But there are times where you might need to communicate uncertainty. Contrast, I'm not sure this will work, with 3 things need to happen for this to work. Someone says 3 things need to happen for this to work, they seem really certain of certain parts, but not others, right? They know that these 3 things need to happen for this to work. Do they control those 3 things? Maybe not. But it doesn't just seem like they have no idea. It doesn't seem they're not sure. They're very sure of the things they can control, and they're not sure of the things that they can't. And so calling out the uncertainty is a way to signal that there is uncertainty, but that I am, as a communicator, am pretty confident in what I'm talking about. You can also say don't hesitate, and what do I mean by that? Ums, uhs, and ers, right? We say these things all the time, particularly when we're speaking, right? Well, maybe, Imagine someone wrote an email to you that said something like the following: I think we, should, maybe. You would never listen to what they had to say, yet we do that all the time when speaking. If you don't think you do it, by the way, record yourself on the next time you're on a Zoom call, transcribe it, highlight all the hesitations. You will be embarrassed about how often you hesitate. How do we get around this? Because it undermines our impact? Well, let's pause instead. Pausing is a great way also to get time to think. Right? Often in spoken conversation, someone asks us a tough question, we need a minute. Pauses are a great way to get a second to think without seeming like we don't know what we're talking about. In fact, pauses make communication more beneficial rather than less, because the audience often says, wow, you're thinking about and digesting what I'm saying, you really care about it. And the last thing I'll say here before wrapping up is know when to express doubt. And that's very clear, right? There are times where we want to be uncertain, right? We want to get other people's viewpoints. It's not good to come out as certain. Right? If we're in a meeting, we say, this is exactly what we should do. I think we should do this. This is the right answer. Everybody else might say, well, if you think this is right, I don't know if I should share my opinion. Whereas we should say, hey, I'm not sure, but I think this could be a good approach. Now, everyone feels like you are receptive to opposing viewpoints, and they're more willing to listen. And so in times when we want others to volunteer information, don't seem so certain. Be willing to express doubt, and other people will be more likely to listen. Okay, I'm going to skip a couple slides here just in the interest of time. I'll let you read about the language of concreteness and emotion and similarity in the book. I'll wrap up and take just a couple questions. As we talked about this morning, there are 6 ways to speak or write more effectively. There's the language of similarity, posing questions, emotion, agency, confidence, and concreteness. And we talked about a few of them today, right? We talked about the language of agency and identity. We talked there about turning actions into identities, the power of the word you and how it can be used in different contexts. We also talked about the power of good questions, right? Questions to shape conversations, to direct attention, to encourage action. And we also talked about the language of certainty, when it's good and when it's not so good. And I'll let you read about the other types of language in the book. Each is important in different ways, right? Concreteness can be a great way to give people a memorable sense of what you're saying, right? And help them understand better and also feel like you're listening to them. Emotion can be a good type of language to use to build personal connections and encourage people to buy into stories and narratives and the like. And so with my last 2 minutes here, let me just wrap up. 2 key questions or next steps, I'd say, from this talk. I know you have a great slate of presenters today, lots of interesting information. I see many of you taking notes, which is great. I often come back from conferences like this with pages of notes, and I never know what to do next. So 2 things from this talk. The first, right, is understand the power of magic words. Understand that it's not just about the ideas we want to communicate, but how we communicate them, the specific words or language we use. And then second, once we understand the power of magic words, we can figure out how to use them, right? We can pose better questions. We can harness the language of agency and identity. We can speak more concretely or use more certain language, or in some cases, decide we want to be open to opposing viewpoints and express more doubt. Because it's not random and it's not luck and it's not chance. There's a science behind why certain communication has more impact than others. If we understand that science, we can craft more effective messaging, we can build better content, we can become better leaders, and at the core, we can change anything. So thank you guys very much, and I'd love to take a couple questions. Thank you. Yes. I can hear you and pass it back, or you want to go there? Okay.
My apologies, I didn't
No
see
problem.
the mic.
I was looking for them too, but they were hard to see. It was dark.
So the first question I have is, I actually work at a research organization,
Yep.
and I think I heard you say that you should or should not say, I found results show. So I'm hoping you can explain that.
Yeah.
And the other thing I just want to also very quickly ask is, I heard you talk about the language of confidence.
Yep.
And I think one thing that I'm curious about, particularly as a woman of color, is how does this resonate across gender and race and that kind of thing? Because I think there is a little bit more to unpack there.
Good, yeah. So to the first question, what I'm suggesting is using I connects you to whatever you're saying, and it depends on whether you want to do that or not, right? So what's nice about results show is it says, look, it's not, I didn't find this because I wanted to, right? This is just true. Ooh. Well, I'm going to leave that there, I think. Well, thank you. Sorry, I don't think I have to click anymore. This is just true, right? Anyone would have uncovered it, so I'm distancing myself from the results because I don't want to see, they're not biased, right? They were done objectively. But if I want to take credit for doing the work, then I may want to say, hey, I did all this work and the results show that. Or we did all this work if it's a team and the results show that. To your second point, I get this question a lot and it's a very good one. Yeah, and so I want to be a little careful because sometimes some of these things are correlated, right? So sometimes I get this question also from younger people. Say, hey, I'm younger, and being certain as a younger person has negative impacts. I think part of this is correlated with your role in the organization, right? If you're the CEO, for example, versus a first-time part of the organization, there may be different effects to different language. But I certainly agree that being female or someone of color may make some of this more challenging. I think everything I've said is about understanding your audience, right, in some way, shape, or form. The same words will make you seem certain and confident regardless of who you're talking to, but whether this is a time to be more confident or a time to express more doubt depends on that audience and your role within that situation. And so I think the more you understand, hey, how am I going to be perceived by using this language, the more strategic you can be. But thank you
so much.
Yeah. Should I go over here, please? Yeah.
Hey there, Jonah. My name is Mark Meyer. My pronouns are he, him, and I noticed immediately your bright green shoes.
Thank you.
And I just wonder if you have any thoughts on the power of nonverbal communication and visual communication and the power of that versus the power of spoken words.
Yeah. You know, I think a lot about what to wear when I show up at something like this, because I'm up here, and the first thing you guys do is judge me based on what I'm wearing. Like, you don't know anything about me. We do this all the time. Right? And so I used to wear a jacket. I've been told I have a young face. Now I have like a little bit of white in one of my sideburns, which makes me seem older, I think. But I used to wear a jacket so people didn't think I was 12. Right? And so when I showed up, people would listen to what I had to say. Now I'm a little bit older, and given I have a slightly white sideburn and 2 kids, I feel like I can wear more fun sneakers and not necessarily wear a jacket. But I think a lot about those things in certain types of interactions, right? So in interpersonal interactions, when we're showing up on Zoom, the shirt we're wearing, I certainly think those things are important. We've done some work recently even about hand gestures, which has been really neat. So, you probably, some people talk more with their hands, other people's less. We find that hand gestures in general can increase the impact of your communication, particularly if you use gestures that illustrate what you're saying, right? So if you use gestures that help people understand content by the way you move your hands, it can increase your impact even further. But thank you, good question. We probably have time for 2 more, so I'll take 1 here and maybe 2 here, depending. Yes?
Hi, Jonah. J.D. Schramm, thanks so much for everything you shared.
Oh, no problem.
I can't wait to try it. My question is, what's the caveat? What's the risk of us using the 6 magic words that we need to be aware of before we make a mistake?
Yeah, so first I'll say it's not 6 words, it's 6 types of words.
Okay.
So under each of those chapters, there are many types of words in each of them, and I shared the easy stuff with you guys today. So I cheated a little bit. The last chapter, similarity is actually the last chapter, because it's really difficult to understand. There we're not looking at individual words, we're looking at the similarity of language. So if I took 2 paragraphs I said and 2 paragraphs you said and looked at how we use language, how similar they are to one another. There's even work in there looking at how we can uncover the language of racism and sexism by looking at children's books or the way police officers speak to members of the community. So more complicated things that are more than just, hey, say this word and they have certain impact. I would say that the caveat, similar to what I said to your colleague, is I think we need to understand our audience, right? So language is a tool. But sometimes you need to know which tool to use. You don't always need a hammer. Sometimes you need a saw, and sometimes you need a hammer. And sometimes using a saw the wrong way, if you flip it upside down, isn't going to cut very much. And so I think, as with anything else, it's understanding your audience and understanding the behavioral science behind how this stuff works.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, last question. Sorry.
Hi, Jonah. Sean Adamek. I want to ask you a little bit about the certainty advice.
Yeah.
And first, I want to encourage you to drop the Trump example, and here's why. I think it puts a wall between your audience and your advice, but the reason is that I think that the trouble with the certainty with which he speaks is that it highlights the toxicity of certainty, right? And I think a lot of us work on issues where the very thing that keeps our audiences from getting where we want them to be is that very certainty. Can you just speak to that tension between the advice of speaking with certainty and the toxicity of it?
So first off, if any of you want to know my personal politics, feel free to come up afterwards. I'm happy to share that. But I am aware that there are multiple audiences in rooms, and part of our job is not just to convince people that already believe what we believe, but to convince people on the other side. And so I recognize for some of you, apologies, that seeing Trump may put up a barrier between what I've said and taking that action. But I think what he does and the impact he's had is really important, right? I wish that good scientific ideas and eating healthier and saving the environment and all those good, important causes had as much impact as some of his ideas have had. And I think part of the problem is not that the stuff isn't good, but it's the way we communicate the stuff, right? Broccoli is very good for you. But if I asked you to choose between broccoli and a cheeseburger, most of you would pick the cheeseburger because it tastes better. Right? We've got to figure out how to cook the broccoli, so it still is really nutritious, but people are more likely to choose it. And so I see part of my job is thinking about how can we use language to increase the great work you guys are already doing to have it have more impact, right? I talk to many organizations of nonprofits or many researchers say, the stuff I'm doing is so important. And I say, you know what? That's great, but it's not just about the stuff being good. There's lots of good stuff that gets no attention. Good stuff is not enough. We have to communicate that good stuff in a way people can understand and listen to and take action about, and that's about how we cook it, and that's about the language you use and how we communicate it effectively. And so I certainly agree, not all situations do we want to be certain, right? There are many situations that I come out strong, but you see I tailored it a little bit coming back to this. There are situations where we don't want to be certain, but if we don't understand the language of certainty, if we just say certain words and phrases because they're easy to use, we may be undermining our own impact. And so at least if we understand the impact of our words, we can choose them more effectively. Thank you guys so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Huge thank you for Jonah. All right, I'm back briefly. This is the part where apparently I get to play cruise director For those of you who are old enough, you know that reference maybe. Keep an eye out for Captain Steubing, it ain't me. All right, this is the program. You're seeing this up there. Can someone give me an amen if you're seeing this on the screen? All right, you just saw Jonah. So the next thing you're gonna do, and this is the easy part of your day. Anybody tired of walking? No, okay, well then that's a shame because you're not gonna walk far. Right in front of you, we're gonna open up these things. We have some nice natural light in here so you can remember that it's daytime because I know we just put you to sleep a little bit with these lights down. We've got poster sessions. For those of you who don't know what these are, this is the science fair portion of ComNet. And we're gonna do it twice, today and again tomorrow, so don't feel like you have to rush through everything. But many, many of your colleagues, over 100 of your colleagues, have been kind enough to come and share case studies of the work that they've done recently. What worked, maybe what didn't work, what they've learned along the way. I promise you, you will see stuff that has nothing to do with what you do, and yet has tremendous applications and insights and some ideas that you might want to take home with you. So hop up, not just yet, hop up, go out and check in with folks. You're gonna have an opportunity to talk to these folks one-to-one. After we do that, we're gonna send you to Learning Labs. It's about 75 minutes. These are meant to be deep dives. You've got a couple different choices. Maybe here's where I pause and tell you some good news. If you don't make it to every poster, and you might not, if you don't make it to every Learning Lab, which you will not, you can't do it all because they're going on at the same time. We will have notes from every Learning Lab, and we will take every single poster. They're beautiful, and the folks who made them were very kind. We've digitized them, and we will share them back with you. First, if you're a network member, you'll get them on the Slack, and then later we'll share it for everybody, for all, everywhere online, okay? But suffice to say, you're going to Learning Labs after you go through posters. Then we'll all have a nice lunch together. We'll do some more Learning Labs. You're following along with me, hopefully. We've got a little time for a break because your brain needs a minute. And then we're gonna come back and do another set of Learning Labs. You'll get 3 today, if you can imagine that. You'll have 3 of, I think, 6 choices we've got going, so you get to a few of them. Then we're gonna have an amazing session to close out our day. And then we're gonna bring you into an opportunity called Networking at Night. Everybody familiar with that? We tried this for the first time last year, and I'll explain it to you again later. But the conceit of it is, it's an actual opportunity to talk to folks based on where you live. So anybody here from Washington, D.C.? I think there might be a few. Yeah, there'll be a Washington, D.C. local group, along with our Detroit local group, Denver, L.A., on and on. If you live in that city or in that region, go over, say hello. Your neighbors are hanging out. We also have all our circles gathering, and those are the folks who are gathering around an issue that they're working on, or maybe a shared identity, or maybe a job role that you share. So it'll be an opportunity to sort of naturally connect with a whole bunch of folks. That's our day. This is how we roll. And this is not up for debate. We'd like you, over the course of a couple of days, you're probably getting a sense of this culture is really important to us, because we think if we want to accelerate your learning and your opportunity to have impact, it's easier to do that when you're being cool and kind. Please, everybody, I don't have to read this out loud to you. You know this stuff. Your mom sends you out the door with this message as you go out. Be good. So that is my note to you as we go in to showcase posters. Be good. Have some fun. I'll see you all a little bit later. Thank you very, very much.
You don't ever